Welcome back to Black Bear News. Thank you all for continuing to come over to the new channel and subscribe. If you are watching this on Red Llama Music, please don't subscribe to this channel. I've had actually a ton of subscribers subscribe to Red Llama Music in the past couple of days, and thank you for subscribing, but please subscribe to Black Bear News. The link is in the description box below. I'm moving my entire channel over to Black Bear News. So I wanted to read this really great political article tonight, but somebody sent me, was it Osama, I think, sent me, excuse me, I think Osama sent me this. And I'm not totally sure, but this article is long. It is packed with information, and I want to read the whole thing. And this is probably going to be the entire video, is just reading this article. But it gives a really good synopsis of where we are at. And it really breaks down what a quandary we are in. I just highly suggest you send this to anybody who, you know, might be interested in reading this information, or if somebody is is not clear on where we are in the environmental collapse spectrum. This gives a lot of clarity. This is from Global Research .ca. and globalresearch.org, the Center for Research on Globalization. Who knew? This is by Robert J. Burrows, February 23rd, 2018. Junk planet. Is Earth the largest garbage dump in the universe? Is Earth the largest garbage dump in the universe? I don't know, but it's a safe bet that the Earth would be a contender were such a competition to be held. Let me explain why. To start, just listing the types of rubbish generated by humans or the locations into which each of these is dumped is a staggering task, a reasonably comprehensive, staggering task beyond the scope of one article. Nevertheless, I will give you a reasonably comprehensive summary of the types of garbage being generated, focusing particularly on those that are less well known, the locations into which the garbage is being dumped, and some indication of what is being done about it and what you can do too. But before doing so, it is worth highlighting just why this is such a problem, prompting the United Nations Environment Program to publish this recent report, Towards a Pollution-Free Planet. There are tons of links in this article, and you could probably spend, you know, all day, maybe a couple days, just looking at all the links. I wish I had time in my life to even do that. As noted by Bahir Kamal in his commentary on this study, though some forms of pollution have been reduced as technologies and management strategies have advanced, approximately 19 million premature deaths are estimated to occur annually as a result of the way societies use natural resources and impact the environment to support production and consumption. See, desperate need to halt world's largest killer, pollution, and Once Upon a Time, a Planet, first part, pollution, the world's largest killer. And that is just the cost in human lives. So what are the main types of pollution and where do they end up? Atmospheric pollution. The garbage, otherwise labeled pollution, that we dump into our atmosphere obviously includes the waste products from our burning of fossil fuels and our farming of animals. Primarily, this means carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide generated by driving motor vehicles and burning coal, oil, and gas to generate electricity. And agriculture based on the exploitation of animals. This is having a devastating impact on Earth's climate and environment, with a vast array of manifestations adversely impacting all life on Earth. See, for example, The World is Burning and The True Environmental Cost of Eating Meat. These are all links. When he says C, for example, or C, um, links, links, links. But these well-known pollutants are not the only garbage we dump into the atmosphere. Airline fuel pollutants from both civil and military aircraft have a shocking impact too. With significant adverse public health outcomes, jet emissions, particularly the highly carcinogenic benzpyrene, which can cause various cancers, lymphoma, leukemia, asthma, and birth defects. Jet emissions affect a 25-mile area around an airport. This means that adults, children, animals, and plants are crop dusted by toxic jet emissions for 12 miles from a runway end. A typical commercial airport spews hundreds of tons of toxic pollutants into our atmosphere every day. Hack. These drift over heavily populated areas and settle onto water bodies and crops. Despite efforts to inform relevant authorities of the danger in the USA, for example, they continue to ignore the problem and allow aviation emissions to remain unregulated, uncontrolled, and unreported. See aviation justice. It is no better in other countries. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting whenever they talk about climate change that nobody ever talks about, or rarely talks about airline pollution. They do talk about it, but not as much as they should, because there aren't any. They're not talking about electric airplanes or anything like that. The only answer is stop flying, and can't say that and continue with industrial civilization as we know it. Another category of atmospheric pollutants of which you might not be aware is the particulate aerosol emitted in the atmosphere by the progressive wear of vehicle parts. I found this interesting part of this article. Especially synthetic rubber tires during their service life. Separately from this, however, there are also heavier pollutants from wearing vehicle tires and parts, as well as from the wearing away of road surfaces that accumulate temporarily on roads before being washed off into the waterways where they accumulate. While this substantial pollution and health problem has attracted little research attention, some researchers in a variety of countries have been investigating the problem. In the USA, as early as 1974, tire industry scientists estimated that 600,000 metric tons of tire dust were released by tire wear in the US. This is 1974, or about 3 kilograms of dust released from each tire each year. In 1994, careful measurement of air near roadways with moderate traffic revealed the presence of 3,800 to 6,900 individual tire fragments in each cubic meter of air, with more than 58.5% of them in the fully breathable size range and shown to produce allergic reactions. See tire dust. A study in Japan reported similar adverse environmental and health impacts. See dust resulting from tire wear and the risk of health hazards. Even worse, a study conducted in Moscow reported that the core pollutant of city air, up to 60% of hazardous matter, was the rubber of automobile tires worn off and emitted as small dust. The study found that the average car tire discarded 1.6 kilograms of fine tire dust as an aerosol during its service life, while the tire from a commercial vehicle discarded about 15 kilograms. Interestingly, passenger tire dust emissions during the tire service life significantly exceeded by 6 or 7 times emissions of particulate matter with vehicle exhaust gases. So yeah, let's make those cars electric, but the tires, they're emitting actually more particulates than the gases. The research also determined that tire wear dust contains more than 140 different chemicals with different toxicity, but the biggest threat to human health is polyaromatic hydrocarbons and volatile carcinogens. The study concluded that in the European Union, despite tightening the requirements for vehicle tires in terms of noise emission, wet grip, and rolling resistance stipulated by the UN Regulation number 117, the problem of reduction of tire dust and its carcinogenic substance emissions due to tire wear remains unaddressed. See particulate matter emissions by tires. That's tires with a Y. As one toxicologist has concluded, tire rubber pollution is just one of the many environmental problems in which the research is lagging far behind the damage we may have done. See road rubber. Another pollution problem low on the public radar results from environmental modification techniques involving geoengineering particulates being secretly dumped into the atmosphere by the US military for more than half a century. Based on research beginning in the 1940s, this geoengineering has been used to wage war on the climate, environment, and ultimately ourselves. See, for example, engineered climate cataclysm, Hurricane Harvey, planetary weapons and military weather modifications, chemtrails, atmospheric geoengineering and environmental warfare, chemtrails, aerosol and electromagnetic weapons in the age of nuclear war, and the ultimate weapon of mass destruction, owning the weather for military use. With ongoing official denials about the practice, it has fallen to the ongoing campaigning of committed groups such as Geoengineering Watch to draw attention and work to end this problem. Despite the enormous and accelerating problems already being generated by the above atmospheric pollutants, it is worth pausing briefly to highlight the potential catastrophic nature of the methane discharges now being released by the warming that has already taken place and is still taking place. A recent scientific study published by the prestigious journal Paleo World noted that global warming triggered by the massive release of carbon dioxide may be catastrophic, but the release of methane from hydrate may be apocalyptic. This refers to the methane stored in the permafrost and shelf sediment. Warning of the staggering risk, this study highlights the fact that the most significant variable in the Permian mass extinction event, which occurred 250 million years ago and annihilated 90% of the species on Earth, was methane hydrate. See, methane hydrate, killer cause of Earth's greatest mass extinction, and release of Arctic methane may be apocalyptic, study warns. How long have we got? Not long. With a recent Russian study identifying 7,000 underground methane gas bubbles poised to explode in the Arctic. Is much being done about this atmospheric pollution, including the ongoing apocalyptic release of methane? Well, there is considerable push, quote unquote, to switch to renewable solar, wind, wave, geothermal energy in some places and to produce electric cars in others. But these worthwhile initiatives aside, and if you ignore the mountain of tokenistic measures that are sometimes officially promised, the answer is not really. With many issues that critically impact this problem, including rainforest destruction, vehicle emissions, geoengineering, jet aircraft emissions, and methane releases from animal agriculture, still being largely ignored. If you want to make a difference on this biosphere-threatening issue of atmospheric pollution, you have three obvious choices to consider. Do not travel by air, do not travel by car, and do not eat meat, and perhaps other animal products. This will no doubt require considerable commitment on your part. But without your commitment in these regards, there is no realistic hope of averting near-term human extinction. So your choices are critical. Emphasis on so your choices are critical. Ocean garbage. Many people will have heard of the problem of plastic rubbish being dumped into the ocean. Few people, however, have any idea of the vast scale of the problem, the virtual impossibility of cleaning it up, and the monumental ongoing cost of it, whether measured in terms of non-human lives, lost ecological services, or financially. And unfortunately, plastic is not the worst pollutant we are dumping into the ocean, but I will discuss it first. In a major scientific study involving 24 expeditions conducted between 2007 and 2013, which was designed to estimate the total number of plastic particles and their weight floating in the world's oceans, the team of scientists estimated that there was a minimum of 5.25 trillion particles weighing 268,940 tons. See, plastic pollution in the world's ocean, more than 5 trillion plastic pieces weighing over 250,000 tons afloat at sea, and full scale of plastic in the world's oceans revealed for a first time. Since then, of course, the problem has become progressively worse. See, plastic garbage patch bigger than Mexico found in Pacific, and plastic chokes the seas. Does it matter, you might ask? According to this report, it matters a great deal. See, new UN report finds marine debris harming more than 800 species, costing countries millions. Can we remove the plastic to clean up the ocean? Not easily. The U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration has calculated that if you tried to clean up less than 1% of the North Pacific Ocean, it would take 67 ships 1 year. See the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Nevertheless, and despite the monumental nature of the problem, see Great Pacific Garbage Patch, far bigger than imagined, aerial survey shows, organizations like the Algalita Research Foundation, Ocean Cleanup, and Positive Change for Marine Life have programs in place to investigate the nature and extent of the problem and remove some of the rubbish. while emphasizing that preventing plastic from entering the ocean is key. In addition, the UN Convention on Biological Diversity outlined a series of measures to tackle the problem in its 2016 report, Marine Debris Understanding, Preventing and Mitigating the Significant Adverse Impacts on Marine and Coastal Biodiversity. In February 2017, the UN launched its Clean Seas campaign, inviting governments, corporations, NGOs, and individuals to sign the pledge to reduce their plastic consumption. See Clean Seas Campaign and World Campaign to Clean Torrents of Plastic Dumped into the Oceans. Sadly, of course, it is not just plastic that is destroying the oceans. They absorb carbon dioxide as one manifestation of the climate catastrophe, and among other outcomes, this accelerates ocean acidification, adversely impacting coral reefs and the species that depend on these reefs. In addition, a vast runoff of agricultural poisons, fossil fuels, and other wastes is discharged into the ocean, adversely impacting life at all ocean depths. See staggering level of toxic chemicals found in creatures at the bottom of the sea, scientists say, and generating ocean dead zones, regions that have too little oxygen to support marine organisms. See, our planet is exploding with marine dead zones. Since the Fukushima nuclear reactor disaster in 2011, and despite the ongoing official cover-up, vast quantities of radioactive materials are being ongoingly discharged into the Pacific Ocean, irradiating everything within its path. See Fukushima, a nuclear war without a war, the unspoken crisis of worldwide nuclear radiation. Finally, you may not be aware that there are up to 70, this is amazing because I didn't know this, 70 still functional nuclear weapons, as well as 9 nuclear reactors lying on the ocean floor as a result of accidents involving nuclear warships and submarines. See Naval Nuclear Accidents, The Secret Story, and Nuclear Needle in a Haystack, The Cold War's Missing Atom Bombs. Amazing. Virtually nothing is being done to stem the toxic discharges, contain the Fukushima radiation releases, or find the nuclear weapons and nuclear reactors on the ocean floor. Waterways and groundwater contamination. Many people would be familiar with the contaminants that find their way into the Earth's wetlands, rivers, creeks, and lakes. Given corporate negligence, this includes all the chemical poisons and heavy metals used in corporate farming and mining operations, as well as, in many cases around the world where rubbish removal is poorly organized, the sewage and all other forms of domestic waste discharged from households. Contamination of the world's creeks, rivers, lakes, and wetlands is now so advanced that many are no longer able to fully support marine life. For brief summaries of the problem, see pollution in our waterways is harming people and animals. How can you stop this? Wasting our waterways, toxic industrial pollution, and the unfulfilled promise of the Clean Water Act, and China's new weapon against water pollution, its people. Beyond this, however, Earth's groundwater supplies, located in many underground aquifers, such as the Ogallala Aquifer in the United States, are also being progressively contaminated by gasoline, oil, and chemicals from leaking storage tanks. Bacteria, viruses, and household chemicals from faulty septic systems, hazardous waste from abandoned and uncontrolled hazardous waste sites, and of which there are over 20,000 in the USA alone, leaks from landfill items such as car battery acid, paint, and household cleaners, and the pesticides, herbicides, and other poisons used on farms and home gardens. See groundwater contamination. However, while notably absent from the list above, these contaminants also include radioactive waste from nuclear tests. See groundwater drunk by billions of people may be contaminated by radioactive material spread across the world by nuclear testing in the 1950s, and the chemical contamination caused by hydraulic fracking in search of shale gas, for which about 750 chemicals and components, some extremely toxic and carcinogenic like lead and benzene, have been used. See fracking chemicals. There are local campaigns to clean up rivers, creeks, lakes, and wetlands in many places around the world, focusing on the primary problems, ranging from campaigning to end poison runoffs from mines and farms to physically removing plastic and other trash in that area. But a great deal more needs to be done, and they could use your help. Soil contamination. Our unsustainable commercial farming and soil management practices are depleting the soil of nutrients and poisoning it with synthetic fertilizers, herbicides, pesticides, and antibiotics, the latter contained in animal manure at such a prodigious rate that even if there were no other adverse impacts on the soil, it would be unable to sustain farming within 60 years. See, only 60 years of farming left if soil degradation continues. But not content to simply destroy the soil through farming, we also contaminate it with heavy metal waste from industrial activity, as well as sewer mismanagement. See, black soils, excessive use of arsenic, cadmium, lead, and mercury. The waste discharges from corporate mining. See, for example, the 100 billion gold mine in the West Papuans who say they are counting the cost, and the radioactive and many other toxic wastes from military violence discussed below. We also lose vast quantities of soil by extensive clear felling of pristine forests to plant commercially valuable but ecologically inappropriate garbage species such as palm oil trees. See the Great Palm Oil Scandal, soybeans, see soy changes map of Brazil, set to become world's leading producer, and biofuel crops. This leaves the soil vulnerable to rainfall, which carries it into local creeks and rivers and deposits it downstream or into the ocean. Staggering though it may sound, we are losing tens of billions of tons of soil each year, much of it irreversibly. Is anything being done? A little, in response to the decades-long push by some visionary individuals and community organizations to convert all farming to organic, biodynamic, and/or permaculture principles. Some impact is being made in some places to halt the damage caused by commercial farming. You can support these efforts by buying organically or biodynamically certified food, that is, food that hasn't been poisoned, or creating a permaculture garden in your own backyard. Any of these initiatives will also benefit your own health. Of course, there is still a long way to go with the big agricultural corporations such as Monsanto, more interested in profits than your health. See, killing us softly, glyphosate, herbicide, or genocide. Top 10 poisons that are the legacy of Monsanto, and Monsanto has knowingly been poisoning people for at least 35 years. One other noteworthy progressive change occurred in 2017 when the UN finally adopted the Minamata Convention to curb mercury use. See, landmark UN-backed treaty on mercury takes effect, and Minamata Convention curbing mercury use is now legally binding. As for other issues mentioned above, there is nothing to celebrate with mining and logging corporations committed to their profits and at the expense of the local environments and indigenous peoples all over the world, and governments showing little effective interest in curbing this, or taking more than token interest in cleaning up toxic military waste sites. As always, local indigenous and activist groups often work on these issues against enormous odds. See, for example, Ecuador Endangered. Apart from supporting the work of many activist groups that work on these issues, one thing that each of us can do is put aside the food scraps left during meal preparation and after our meal and compost them. Food scraps and waste are an invaluable resource. Nature composts this material to create soil, and your simple arrangement to compost your food scraps will help to generate more of that invaluable soil we are losing. Composting is key. Antibiotic waste. One form of garbage we have been producing under the radar in vast quantities for decades is antibiotic and antifungal drug residue. C, environmental pollution with antimicrobial agents from bulk drug manufacturing industries associated with dissemination of pathogens. However, given that the bulk of this waste is secretly discharged untreated into waterways by the big pharmaceutical companies, C, Big Pharma fails to disclose antibiotic waste leaked from factories, the microbes are able to build up resistance to the ingredients in the medicines that are supposed to kill them, thus fueling the creation of deadly superbugs. Moreover, because the resistant microbes travel easily and have multiplied in huge numbers all over the world, they have created a grave public health emergency that is already thought to kill hundreds of thousands of people a year. Are governments acting to end this practice? According to the recent and most comprehensive study of the problem, international regulators are allowing dirty drug production methods to continue unchecked. C, Big Pharma's pollution is creating deadly superbugs while the world looks the other way. Given the enormous power of the pharmaceutical industry, which effectively controls the medical industry in many countries, the most effective response we can make as individuals is to join the rush to natural health practitioners, such as practitioners of homeopathy, osteopathy, naturopathy, Ayurvedic medicine, herbal medicine, and Chinese medicine, which do not prescribe pharmaceutical drugs. For further ideas, see Defeating the Violence in Our Food and Medicine. Perhaps the most frightening pollutant that we now risk releasing into the environment goes beyond the genetic mutilation of organisms, GMOs, which has been widely practiced by some corporations such as Monsanto for several decades. See, for example, GM food crops illegally growing in India, the criminal plan to change the genetic core of the nation's food system. Given that genetic engineering's catastrophic outcomes are well documented, see, for example, 10 Reasons to Oppose Genetic Engineering, what are the gene drives? Imagine that by releasing a single fly into the wild, you could genetically alter all the flies on the planet, causing them all to turn yellow, carry a toxin, or go extinct. This is the terrifyingly powerful premise beyond gene drives, a new and controversial genetic engineering technology that can permanently alter an entire species by releasing one bioengineered individual. How effective are they? Gene drives can entirely re-engineer ecosystems, create fast-spreading extinctions, and intervene in living systems at a scale far beyond anything ever imagined. For example, if gene drives are engineered into a fast reproducing species, it could alter their populations within short timeframes from months to a few years and rapidly cause extinction. This radical new technology, also called a mutagenic chain reaction, combines the extreme genetic engineering of synthetic biology and new gene editing techniques with the idea that humans can and should use such powerful, unlimited tools to control nature. Gene drives will change the fundamental relationship between humanity and the natural world forever. The implications of the environment, food security, peace, and even social stability are breathtaking, particularly given that existing government regulations for the use of genetic engineering in agriculture have allowed widespread genetic contamination of this food supply and the environment. See Reckless Driving, Gene Drives, and the End of Nature. Consistent with their track records of sponsoring, promoting, and using high-tech atrocities against life, the recently released in October 27th, 2017, gene drive files revealed that the U.S. military and individuals such as Bill Gates have been heavily involved in financing research, development, and promotion of this grotesque technology. See, military revealed as top funder of gene drives. Gates Foundation paid $1.6 million to influence UN on gene drives and gene drive files. Why would the U.S. military be interested, you might ask? Well, imagine what could be done to an enemy race with an extinction gene drive. As always, while genuinely life-enhancing grassroots initiatives struggle for funding, any project that offers the prospects of huge profits, usually at the enormous cost to life, gets all the funding it needs. If you haven't realized yet that the global elite is insane, it might be worth pondering it now. See, the global elite is insane. Is anything being done about these life-destroying technologies? A number of groups campaign against genetic engineering, and SynBioWatch works to raise awareness of gene drives, to carefully explain the range of possible uses for them, and to expose the extraordinary risks and dangers of the technology. You are welcome to participate in their efforts too. All right, this is going to be a long video. One comment on that. Yeah, I read somewhere, this is years ago, that that there was a possibility that just a genetically mutated food crop could actually like implode an entire ecosystem, and that it was more possible than a slim chance. So, the GMOs are playing with biological fire, literally. Like, we don't know how this will affect an entire ecosystems in the long run. Nanoparticles. A nanoparticle is a microscopic particle whose size is measured in nanometers. 1 nanometer is 1/1000th of a meter. In simple English, nanoparticles are extremely tiny. Nanoparticles are already being widely used, including during the manufacture of cosmetics, pharmacology products, scratch proof eyeglasses, crack-resistant paints, anti-graffiti coating for walls, transparent sunscreen, stain-repellent fabrics, self-cleaning windows, and ceramic coatings for solar cells. Excuse me. Nanoparticles can contribute to stronger, lighter, cleaner, and smarter surfaces and systems. Yeah. See, what are the uses of nanoparticles in consumer products? Some researchers are so enamored with nanoparticles that they cannot even conceal their own delusions. According to one recent report, researchers want to achieve a microscopic autonomous robot that measures no more than 6 nanometers across and can be controlled by remote. Swarms of these nanorobots can clean your house, and since they're invisible to the naked eye, their effects would appear to be magical. They could also swim easily and harmlessly through your bloodstream, which is what medical scientists find exciting. See, what are nanoparticles? Unfortunately, however, nanoparticle contamination of medicines is already well documented. See new quality control investigations on vaccines, micro and nano contamination. Another report indicates that some nanomaterials may also induce cytotoxic or genotoxic responses. See toxicity of particulate matter from incineration or nano waste. What does this mean? Well, cytotoxic means that something is toxic to the cells, and genotoxic describes the property of chemical agents that damage the genetic information within a cell, thus causing mutations which may lead to cancer. Beyond the toxic problems of the nanoparticles themselves, those taking a wider view report that extraordinary difficulties of managing nano waste. In fact, according to one recent report prepared for the UN, nano waste is notoriously difficult to contain and monitor. Due to its small size, it can spread in water systems or become airborne, causing harm to human health and to the environment. Moreover, nanotechnology is growing at an exponential rate, but it is clear that issues related to the disposal and recycling of nano waste will grow at an ever faster rate if left unchecked. See nanotechnology, nano waste, and the effects on ecosystems, a need for efficient monitoring, disposal, and recycling. Despite this apparent nonchalance about the health impacts of nanowaste, one recent report reiterates that studies on the toxicity of nanoparticles are abundant in literature. See toxicity of particulate matter from incineration of nanowaste. Moreover, in January, European Union agencies published 3 documents concerning government oversight of nanotechnology and new genetic engineering techniques. Together, the documents put in doubt the scientific capacity and political will of the European Commission to provide any effective oversight of the consumer, agricultural, and industrial products derived from these emerging technologies. See European Commission, following the Trump administration's retreat from science-based regulation. So, as these recent reports make clear, little is being done to monitor, measure, or control these technologies, or monitor, measure, and control the harmful effects of discharging nano waste. Fortunately, with the usual absence of government interest in acting genuinely on our behalf, activist groups such as the Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy and the Organic Consumers Association campaign against nanotechnology as part of their briefs. Needless to say, however, a lot more needs to be done. Space junk. Not content to dump our garbage in or under the earth, we also dump our junk in space too. How do we do this? You may well ask. Quite simply, in fact. We routinely launch a variety of spacecraft into space to either orbit the Earth, especially satellites designed to perform military functions such as spying, target identification, and detection of missile launches, but also satellites to perform some civilian functions, such as weather monitoring, navigation, and communication. Or we send spacecraft into space on exploratory missions, such as the Mars Exploratory Rover Opportunity. However, getting spacecraft into space requires the expenditure of vast amounts of energy, which adds to pollution of the atmosphere, and the progressive discarding of rocket propulsion sections of the launch craft. Some of these fall back to Earth as junk, but much of it ends up orbiting the Earth as junk. So what form does this junk take? It includes inactive satellites, the upper stages of launch vehicles, discarded bits left over from separation, frozen clouds of water, and tiny flecks of paint, all orbiting high above Earth's atmosphere. With space junk now a significant problem, the impact of junk on satellites is regularly causing damage and generating even more junk. Is it much of a problem? Yes, indeed. The problem is so big, in fact, that NASA and the USA keeps track of the bigger items, which travel at speeds of up to 17,500 miles per hour, which is fast enough for a relatively small piece of orbital debris to damage a satellite or a spacecraft. How many pieces does it track? By 2013, it was tracking 500,000 pieces of space junk as they orbited the Earth. See space debris and human spacecraft. Of course, these items are big enough to track, but not all junk is that big. In fact, a recent estimate indicates the number of space junk items could be in excess of 100 trillion. See space junk, tracking and removing orbital debris. Is anything being done about space junk? No, government involved in space is really interested. It's too expensive for that to be seriously considered. But given the ongoing government and military interest in weaponizing space, as again reflected in the recent U.S. Nuclear Posture Review 2018, which would add a particularly dangerous type of junk to space, the Global Network Against Weapons and Nuclear Power in Space has been conducting effective worldwide campaigns since 1992 to mobilize resistance to weapons and nuclear power being deployed and used in space. Military waste, the carnage and waste produced by preparation for and the conduct of military violence, is so vast that it almost defies description and calculation. In its most basic sense, every single item produced to perform a military function, from part of a uniform to a weapon, is garbage. An item that has no functional purpose unless you believe that killing people is functional. To barely touch on it here, then, military violence generates a vast amount of pollution, which contaminates the atmosphere, oceans, and all free water sources, and the soil with everything from the waste generated by producing military uniforms to the radioactive waste, which contaminates environments indefinitely. For just a taste of this pollution, see The Toxic Remnants of War Project, the film Sacred Lands and Wounded Lives, U.S. Military World's Largest Polluter, hundreds of bases gravely contaminated, depleted uranium and radioactive contamination in Iraq, an overview, and the long history of war's environmental costs. Many individuals, groups, and networks around the world campaign to end war. See, for example, War Resisters International, the International Peace Bureau, and World Beyond War. You can participate in these efforts. Nuclear waste. Woo-wee. This goes on and on, y'all. Hoo-wee. All right, this is going to be a long video. Nuclear waste, partly related to military violence, but also a product of using nuclear power. Humans generate vast amounts of waste from exploitation of the nuclear fuel cycle. Yeah. This ranges from the pollution generated by mining uranium to the radioactive waste generated by producing nuclear power or using nuclear weapons. But it also includes the nuclear waste generated by accidents such as that at Chernobyl and Fukushima. Again, for just a taste of the monumental nature of this problem, see emergency declared at nuclear waste site in Washington State. Disposing of nuclear waste is a challenge for humanity, and 3 years since the kitty litter disaster at Waste Isolation Pilot Plant. While the London Dumping Convention permanently bans the dumping of radioactive and industrial waste at sea, which means nothing in the face of the out-of-control discharges of Fukushima, of course, see 1993 dumping of radioactive waste at sea gets banned, groups such as Friends of the Earth and Greenpeace continue to campaign against the nuclear industry, including radioactive waste dumping, and to promote renewable energy. They would be happy to have your involvement. Our bodies, some of the garbage that ends up being dumped is done via our bodies. Apart from the junk food produced at direct cost to the environment, the cost of these poisoned, processed, and nutritionally depleted food-like substances also manifest as ill health in our bodies and discharges of contaminated waste. Rather than eating food that is organically or biodynamically grown and healthily prepared, most of us eat processed food-like substances that are poisoned. That is, grown with large doses of synthetic fertilizers, herbicides, and pesticides that also destroy the soil and kill vast numbers of insects. See, death and extinction of bees. And Insectageddon, farming is more catastrophic than climate breakdown. And then cook this food in rancid oils and perhaps even irradiate it before eating. Microwave. Although microwave ovens were outlawed in the Soviet Union in 1976, they remain legal elsewhere. What the hell? I didn't even know that. C, the hidden hazards of microwave cooking, how your microwave oven damages your health in multiple ways, and microwave cooking is killing people. I don't own a microwave, and I do not want to own a microwave. For the love of God. Unfortunately, however, considerable official effort still goes in developing new ways to nuclearize our food. See 7 examples of nuclear technology improving food and agriculture, despite long established natural practices that are effective and have no damaging side effects or polluting outcomes. But apart from poisoned, processed, and unhealthily prepared food, we also inject our bodies with contaminated vaccines. See new quality control investigations on vaccines, micro and nano contamination, dirty vaccines, new study reveals prevalence and contaminants, and aluminum, autoimmunity, autism, and Alzheimer's. Consume medically prescribed antibiotics, see section above, and other drugs, see the spoils of war, and Afghanistan's multi-million-dollar heroin trade, Washington's hidden agenda, restore the drug trade. And leave the environment to deal with the contaminated waste generated by the production and the discharges from our body. Many individuals and organizations all over the world work to draw attention to these and related issues, including the death dealing of doctors, but the onslaught of corporate media promotion and scare campaigns means that much of this effort is suppressed. Maintaining an unhealthy and medically dependent human population is just too profitable. If you want to genuinely care for your health and spare the environment, the toxic junk dumped through your body. The ideas above in relation to growing and eating organic biodynamic food and consulting natural health practitioners are a good place to start. Ding. Ordinary rubbish. For many people, of course, dealing with their daily garbage requires nothing more than putting it into a rubbish bin. How does this solve the problem? Well, for a start, even recycled rubbish is not always recycled. Even when it is, the environmental cost is usually high. In fact, various costs of dealing with rubbish is now so severe that China, a longtime recipient of waste from various parts of the world, no longer wants it. See, China no longer wants your trash. Here's why that's potentially disastrous. Of course, there are special events that encourage us to dump extra rubbish into the Earth's biosphere. Ever thought about what happens following special celebrations like Christmas? See the environmental Christmas hangover or the waste discharge from cruise ships. See 16 things cruise lines never tell you. Cruises are the worst fucking thing you could ever fucking do. Don't ever go on a cruise, please, dear Lord. Does all this pollution really matter? Well, as mentioned at the beginning, we pay an enormous cost for it, both in terms of human life, but in other ways too. See the Lancet Commission on Pollution and Health. Junk information. One category of junk, which is easily overlooked, and on which I will not elaborate, is the endless stream of junk information with which we are bombarded, whether it is corporate news, devoid of important news about our world or any truthful analysis for what is causing it, on television, the radio, or in newspapers, letterbox advertising, telephone marketing, or spam emails. Our attention is endlessly distracted from what matters, leaving most humans ill-informed and too disempowered to resist the onslaught that is destroying our world. What can you do about all the junk identified above? Well, unless you want to start continue deluding yourself that some token measure is taken by you, governments, international organizations such as the United Nations, or industry are going to fix all of this, I encourage you to consider taking personal action that involves making a serious commitment. That is because, at the most fundamental level, it is individuals who consume and then discharge the waste products of their consumption. And if you choose what you consume with greater care and consume less, no one is going to produce what you don't buy or discharge the waste products of that production on your behalf. Remember Gandhi? He was not just the great Indian independence leader. His personal possessions at his death numbered his few items of self-made clothing and his spectacles. We can't all be like Gandhi, but we can be a symbol. He can be a symbol to remind us that all our possessions and all our consumption are not the measure of our value to ourselves or anyone else. If the many itemized suggestions above may sound daunting, how does this option sound? Do you think that you could reduce your consumption by 10% this year? And ideally, do it in each of 7 categories: water, household energy, vehicle fuel, paper, plastics, metal, and meat. Could you do it progressively, reducing your consumption by 10% each year for 15 consecutive years? See the Flame Tree Project to Save Life on Earth. I am well aware of the emotional void that makes many people use shopping therapy to feel better, or otherwise consume, perhaps by traveling, to distract themselves. If you are in this category, then perhaps you could tackle this problem at its source by putting feelings first. Or as they say in Star Wars, reach out with your feelings. No consumer item or material event can ever fill the void in your selfhood. But you can fill this void by traveling the journey to become the powerful individual that evolution gave you the potential to be. If you want to understand how you lost your selfhood, see Why Violence and Fearless Psychology and Fearful Psychology, Principles and Practice. You might also help ensure that children do not acquire the consumption pollution addiction by making My Promise to Children. If you want to campaign against one of the issues threatening human survival discussed briefly above, consider planning a nonviolent campaign strategy. And if you wish to commit to resisting violence of all kinds, you can do so by signing the online pledge of the People's Charter to create a nonviolent world. In the final analysis, each of us has a choice. We can contribute to the ongoing creation of Earth as the planet of junk, or we can use our conscience, intelligence, and determination to guide us in resisting the destruction of our world. Whew. Little blowback on that one, little hair blowback on that one. That was a lot. I hope you all enjoyed that. I really enjoyed that article. I read like half of it and decided I was going to read the whole thing tonight. A lot to think about in that one, a lot of information to take in. And just checking my my comments, that was Osama that sent me that. Thank you, Osama, for sending me that. Very eye-opening and very informative article. Thank you all for sending me all the links that you send me each and every day. There's just so much to take in, and I appreciate your help. As always, I appreciate your eyes and your ears and your conscience. That's all I have for tonight. I will be back tomorrow, hopefully with another video. Until then, peace.